Hey, folks, in this interview, I'm sitting with my friend, Miss Renee Robin. We're going to be talking about prudes, Puritans, and pitchforks. This is TWIP. Hey, welcome back to another episode of This Week in Photo. I am your host, Frederick Van Johnson. Today's show, controversial. Strap yourself in. We're talking about prudes, Puritans, and pitchforks. Say that 3 times fast. And I'm here with my friend who is none of that stuff, Miss Renee Robin. Renee and I are going to be talking about her latest body of work that is kind of playing outside the lines and in some ways inviting in those prudes, Puritans, and pitchforks to, people that are otherwise are judgmental about artwork that doesn't play sort of within established norms. Renee Robin, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good. I'm excited to talk about this. You and I were chit-chatting back and forth last night, and you were sending over the images that are going to be in the blog post for this episode. And Wow, those images are fantastic. I'm going to throw some of them up now as we're talking in the edit. But fantastic work. First of all, like what inspires someone to do that level of work where it's, I don't even know how to position it. I mean, there's obviously the world of BDSM and bondage and all that stuff where people are doing that kind of thing, but to do it from an artistic sort of interpretive standpoint, how do you even get there? Was it like in your head and you just had to get it out, or did something spark you to shoot that?
Well, so the thing is I've been photographing that kind of content for most of my career, but of course not publicly.
Yeah.
There's been some that's been public since the start. I did some work with a friend of mine, Amberlynn, a bunch of years ago, and another model from Montreal named Joanie, and we did this great series with shibari and kittens.
What?
So I was like, what are the 2 cutest things that I could think about? And this is like 7 years old now, so it's been a while.
Well, define shibari first, because people may not know these terms you're throwing around.
So shibari is a Japanese rope art. Admittedly, I'm not as caught up on my lore of shibari as I should be. Mm-hmm. But I've always appreciated the art form. I mean, I've been involved in, that kind of alternative community for a really long time. And I think that it's like anything, there's a craft level and then there's an art form level. And I was like, well, what happens if we explore this, but not in the way that it's normally depicted? I mean, a lot of times when I see it depicted online in certain forums, it's like people who are hurting and it's like painful and like purple arms and like, and it's photographed kind of like grungy and aggressively. And I didn't really want to do that to this style of artwork. I kind of wanted to clean it up and kind of express the personal experience that people have when they're going through it, because it is, with somebody who is tied up like that and completely have surrendered their control to somebody else, they're going within, and I kind of wanted to be able to show that in a light that wasn't, like, oh, this is like, pain and domination, when in so many cases it isn't.
Yeah. And that comes through in the shots as well. When I'm looking at the shots, I'm thinking of course the work is beautiful, but I'm also thinking how the logistics that you had to go through to get that. Because looking at some of the behind the scenes shots you sent over, you're not the only one there. I mean, it's a group effort of people that are doing this, and plus you're suspending people in the air. There's a lot of trust that goes in there. Take me behind the scenes. What were some of the challenges that you had to overcome in order to get to the final work?
So doing the suspension, the first steps behind that, of course, is finding a space that has the structural integrity to do those kinds of shots, that also has the space to have the quality of light that I wanted to have for the images. So in that regard, there was a studio in town here, a commercial space that I rent for most of the work when I'm in Edmonton. And it worked out perfectly. So that was step number 1. And then step number 2 is finding a rope team that you can work with. And it has to be a big enough team that you can have enough safety people, you can have people for counterweight, you have to have the right equipment to hold people up safely, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. People with their first aid, people with, fall arrest, safety training, et cetera, et cetera. So, it takes time to find those people. But we have those people now, and everyone plays well together. And then of course the next step on that is finding everyone who trusts everyone else, because the models, fortunately, a lot of these models have worked with these rope artists before, because I'm not using like, oh, let's take a pretty person and, tie them up. And I'm like, no, there's no chance. It has to be people who are experienced, hopefully people who are performers, who do this kind of stuff live and on stage, because then they have a little bit of that exhibitionist side to them that really can help making these images a lot stronger.
And that was what I was going to ask you, is just the idea of how do you find people that are willing to do that? You answered it. So you find people that have experience doing this already, and then you invite them in for the shoot. And it's a huge body of work you've accumulated already. Are you finished with the series, or is it still in progress?
It's still in progress. I have at least 2 more shoots scheduled this year. I'm done shooting for now, though. I mean, we just photographed on the weekend for about an 8-hour day. That was really, really long. We finished about 2:30 in the morning.
Yeah, wow. Wow.
That was kind of brutal.
Yeah, and looking back through your body of work, over the last several years, there's some, you can see some of the influences in there leading up to this body of work. But a lot of your work has been compositing and composite work. This isn't, right? There's not unless I'm missing something, there's not a whole lot of compositing that you're doing in this series. Is that intentional? Are you moving away from the compositing world, or what's the deal there?
So I'm definitely not moving away from the compositing world, because I really like it still. I mean, it's hard and it's time consuming and all those things that we know compositing is. But it does feel really nice to work on something where the only thing that I'm really sculpting is the light and the body position of the models. So it is nice to just go in and when I'm editing, only be doing, like really clean color grading. I like that there's, slight shifts in, I'm not using the same like preset that I made and I'm just applying it across the board. I don't really want to do that. But it is nice to just like, go into Capture One and then go into Photoshop and then just handle color grading. I actually don't really retouch skin at all in these either. I mean, at one point I was like, oh, I'm going to edit out the bruises and,
Yeah.
And then I was like, what do I know? Like, I'm not editing any of that stuff out. I'm not editing out rolls and folds and stuff like that. Like, I want it to be as authentic as it can be.
Yeah. Reality.
Yeah, exactly. The only thing that I will do sometimes is, especially because some of these poses can really hurt, a lot of times they're pushing a lot of pressure out on the belly. And so I will sometimes just like tuck that in just a tiny little bit, like just to look them back how they look in real life. Because, sometimes a certain contortion, especially when you're doing like a pretty hardcore back bend, the breathing process, it comes from the belly, and it can definitely push them out to make them look not at all how they look in real life. So sometimes, but that's it, that's kind of it. I'm not really, I like the cleanness of it. I like that, all the heavy lifting happens before we take the photo.
Yeah, that is fantastic. The one of the directions that I wanted to take this discussion is, I wanted to find out just a little bit of sort of behind the scenes and what was going on when you were shooting these and how you got people to agree to be suspended like this. But also the idea of creativity and not doing what everyone else is doing. I've done a lot of interviews over the past couple of months, and that seems to be a theme where a lot of photographers at your level and artists at your level are railing against that, people that are doing the same old stuff over and over again. In fact, I just a couple hours ago, I interviewed a wedding photographer, Robert Evans, and Robert was railing against people that get this shot list, that the stuff that you're supposed to do at a wedding, and they just walk down the list and that's all they do. How are you able to, first of all, this is the first in a series of questions. How are you able to, not get sucked into that vortex of mediocrity?
how do you not get sucked into the vortex of mediocrity? I don't know. I mean, I feel like I'm always fighting against myself every day anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And, when I look at the work that inspires me, I feel like I am pretty mediocre. So
See, that's humility right there coming out. I don't think
well,
anybody that would look at your body of work and the word mediocre comes to mind, Renee. Sorry.
well, I mean, I guess it all depends on what you're comparing it against, and so the artists that I do look up to and that do really inspire me, I mean, I'm 10 years away from that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find that I'm always just kind of chasing that. I don't really compare myself to what's going on out in the world, what everyone else is doing, because you can't. It's just like it's the best way to just destroy everything about why you're doing something and what you to do, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, like that's just poison,
Yeah, but other photographers would say the opposite. Other photographers will say, in order to get good, you gotta model someone whose art form you admire. So if you like Renee Robin, try to shoot like Renee Robin until your own personal style emerges. Do you disagree with that, or should they be going a different direction?
No, I totally agree with that. But that doesn't mean that you're comparing. That means that you're inspired by. That means that like, okay, I want to try to learn a skill, so I'm going to try to copy, and I've done this. I mean, I never post the work online or anything where I'm just like, I'm going to try to recreate an image just to see if I can do it, especially with the digital art side. But that's not comparing. That's just like trying to figure something out. Comparing yourself is when you're looking at your body of work, putting it next to another person's body of work and going like, oh my God, like,
Mm-hmm.
this is either so much better or so much worse. At the end of the day, it's kind of irrelevant in my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, I compete against myself and my future self.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I use that all the time. I use my past self is looking out for my future self and making decisions that will benefit my future self.
Yeah, exactly. And don't always make the right decision, but
no,
you try.
no. Sometimes it's a conspiracy. All these selves they hate each other.
Yeah, right.
Well, we titled this or sort of led this with prudes. What did I say? Prudes, pitchforks, and whatever. Right. So the people that are looking at your work and they're like, oh, how dare she? How dare she depict women? And you got some males in there too. But how dare she depict people like this? This is so unright. She should be taking pictures of bumblebees pollinating flowers, and why is she doing this level of work? It's not adding to society. What do you say to those people, and how do you deflect that negativity that I'm sure comes at you every day?
I heard a great quote once from an artist that I really respect, and I'm gonna censor it a little bit.
Like you did some of your images, I saw that.
Yeah, I censored the images for you as well.
Yeah.
So it goes like this: if you're not, let me see, how do I censor this?
This is gonna be good.
If you're not paying me, feeding me, or sleeping with me, I don't care about what you think.
Maybe that should have been the title. It'll be the subtitle for this episode.
I mean, I thought the quote was so funny because, I learned it really early on because I was having the same issue then, because back then I was doing risky stuff, quote unquote, considered, because I started doing compositing when compositing wasn't really a thing. There were digital artists and there were photographers. But there wasn't a lot of people doing both. I mean, Flurn didn't exist at the time. Creative Live, I don't even think Creative Live existed then. Maybe it did, but it was in its infancy. But I was getting a lot of shit from photographers being like, what are you doing? Compositing your work, that doesn't make you a photographer. And the digital artists were like, you're using photography, you're not a digital artist.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I don't know where I belong.
Yeah.
And so this other digital artist I know, who's a working professional and who's by every measure of success at the top of the game and working on A-list clients and A-list work, he gave me that quote, the non-PG version, and I was like, yeah, that's actually pretty good.
Yeah, no, I like it too.
It's like, at the end of the day, you have to be able to be proud of the work that you do, and you have to be able to stand by it when nobody else will.
Right. And that's the courage, right? That's a courage part of this whole discussion, is being able to do that, being able to, you know, say that phrase, you know, I forget how it goes, you know, you got to be feeding me or whatever in order for me to care what you say. But then, you know, you look at society today in many ways, and people are driven, some of them are driven by the opinions of others. I mean, look at the Facebook or the Instagram world, where people are driven by the number, some people are driven by the number of likes that they get, you know, and they will change the direction of their art form based on, wow, this piece only got 50 likes and that one got 50,000. I'm going to feed them more of the 50,000 type stuff, you know, whether or not you like doing that. How do you combat that? Or how do you reconcile what the world likes and what your viewer likes? Because presumably that's why you're creating art in the first place, for people to look at. So how do you reconcile what people want to look at and what your mind, heart, and body and the universe is telling you to build?
I mean, once again, that's a conversation between yourself and why you're creating artwork. I make it because I really like making it, and it doesn't really always matter to me if the rest of the world likes it. You know, the stuff that matters is, you know, the people who are involved in the project, did they enjoy themselves? You know, are they proud of the work? Are they proud of the story? Because, you know, we're just sharing the final image. Nobody sees the behind the scenes of how many months or years of practice went into creating an image. You know, they're just seeing like this big. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's either good or it isn't. You know, they're saying like double tap scroll. You know, they're not seeing, like, you know, in some cases with the Shibari stuff, like months of training goes into that, you know, to getting the flexibility and to getting, you know, like the kind of ties figured out in the physics, and like, you know, there's lots that goes into those shots, but nobody sees that. And you know, so I don't really let the judgment of a 2.5 second look at it, double tap scroll, decide whether or not I'm proud of the work. Because we know the behind the scenes, and the stuff that matters is everyone involved at the end of the day looks at it and goes like, yeah, that was really fun. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot, and I love the images. And that's my line. Yeah.
It's interesting. And the you know, another piece of this discussion is, you know, creating bodies of work, right? And then what, you know, this is a self project for you. So this wasn't commissioned by a third party, etc. This is you driving this. You're the customer for this, right? Yeah. So what's the final destination for this? Is it, you know, you just want to like sit back and say, okay, I did that thing that's been on my mind for years, or are you looking at creating a gallery show and taking it around and showing people physical large prints? What's the end game for this series?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I mean, I would love, like everyone, you know, who puts in a ton of work into a series, it's like, yeah, I would love for this to be, you know, a gallery thing or a book thing or a whatever. And already I have enough images to do that.
But more than enough.
Yeah, you saw like a sliver.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
There's so much work.
Wow.
You know, there's a ton of images. There's even stuff that like I haven't even got around to editing yet. But I would love for it to go out like that. That would be lovely. That would be a nice way for everything to kind of smash together and, you know, be something that is tangible and you know, a tactile experience for people. Yeah. That would be fun. And we'll see where that goes, because I've found oftentimes where I'm like, oh yeah, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what it's going to be. And then, you know, 2 years down the road when I'm still working on it, I go like, oh, well, maybe it could be something else. And then the universe, at least in my life, I don't know if you can speak to this, but you're just like, I have all these plans and this is exactly how it's going to go. And then the universe is like, just kidding, I got a better plan.
Yeah.
You know, and it's something
if you're lucky, it says better, right? It's like, I have a different plan.
Yeah. But, you know, so it's like, it's one of those scenarios of like, this is what I think I would like to do. And, ideally first it would be a book. I think that would be really fun.
Yeah.
But whether or not it actually becomes that is another story. Maybe it'll turn into something else, that is more of an event driven thing. I don't know.
I'd like to see, I mean, personally, knowing you, I'd like to see all of that. I want to see a book, a big coffee table book. I want to see a traveling gallery show. Like it should be in LA, Chicago, San Francisco, Sacramento, New York. You got to have the show. But then I also I want people to be able to purchase smaller versions of those, like 8x10s or 5x7s or whatever, smaller, lower price versions if they want a piece of the work that you put together.
Yeah, well, I will. I mean, the prints will be available first. I mean, I do have some of them available already. The Mermaid Shibari series went friggin' everywhere, and we're still working on that body of work as well. So that, already, it's on the bestseller list on my website, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. Really cool.
But yeah, I mean, to go back to this, just kind of popped in my head, to go back to, the why of doing something like this. What was really interesting is a client of mine. We were shooting this weekend with the team, and a client of mine who I've photographed several times, and she's amazing. I had to just shoot a couple extra pieces for her. And I was like, hey, just come down to the studio, it's the hurry up and wait game right now because the tying takes forever. And if we have to go outside and just shoot a couple pieces for the composites, because with her, it's composite work. Maybe we can just squeeze that in. So she did, she came down and she had her stuff with her. And, what I didn't know was that her and one of the rope artists that I use, Heidi, had been communicating already. And, about doing some rope art with me doing the photography, which would be awesome. But the model had a very bad experience, with someone who had, unfortunately, and this is why I'm so careful to tell people, who are getting into photographing this kind of stuff, please use experienced teams, and please, trust is so, so, so important. This isn't about, hurting people. This isn't about, controlling or being harmful or risking unnecessarily, for an image that's just ridiculous. Because this model had been really hurt, and couldn't trust anyone to do these kinds of images with her anymore. And she's very experienced and has an incredible body of work in her past. And she actually hung out for the entire shoot. It was 8 hours. And at the end of it, she was like, hey, do you mind if I try something? And so I talked to the team and I was like, hey guys, what do you think about this? She's obviously been watching. She seems to trust us. She's been communicating with one of the female rope artists already. Do you want to take a swing at it? And I realize you're tired and your hands are tired and everything. Do you think we can give it a go? And we did, and it was a really good experience. And one of those images is actually in the list of images that I gave you.
Okay, cool.
And so it was really, really awesome to see that, that the group that we have, emits enough trust in each other. And, for someone who had been really, really injured, to say hey, yeah, I'm willing to take a risk on this. And that's really cool. And that, I think, is a really good why to do something.
Yeah. And it's also a testament to team building and how you're able to bring together this group of people that are smart and talented, have their head on straight. Because I could see, in a not ideal scenario, there'd be somebody who's not a fit for that team that could just basically screw up the whole thing, right?
Well, the biggest thing is trust and injury, because especially when we're doing suspension stuff, I always tell people, and since these images have gone viral, I've had so many people be like, oh my God, I want to be suspended so bad. And I want those images and I want that to be me. And I'm just like, have you ever been suspended before? Have you ever been tied up by somebody other than your boyfriend, in bed?
Yeah.
This is not the same experience. This isn't about that at all. It's not about sex.
Yeah.
That's been a bit of a challenge, just telling people no. People are just like, oh my God, I want this to be me. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Your first time should not be a photo shoot. Your first time should not be in a room with a whole bunch of people, because it happens sometimes where people just freak out. And And, because I've had a lot of clients. Unfortunately, I haven't had anybody freak out on set before because I'm very, very careful. But we've had practice sessions, which is the reason why we have practice sessions, where we go to do something and, everything, they have one point of contact on the ground, whether it's a foot, whether it's a hand or whatever, and they can't lift that limb off the ground for whatever reason, even though 100% of their body weight is being held carefully and safely and, moderately comfortably. For whatever reason that day, they just can't let that point of contact go.
Interesting.
And there's a million reasons. Yeah, exactly. There's a million reasons, when you're looking at it psychologically, why that can happen, whether they're tired, whether they've just had a bad day, whether, in life they feel like they're just kind of losing control. There's so many reasons why that can happen, but the last thing you want is for something like that to happen on set, or, worse yet, you take someone who's never been tied up before and you string them up and they freak out, and the only way out is to cut them out, because they're losing their mind.
Yeah.
I've been very fortunate to never have any of those things happen on set. But I've definitely heard of those things happening. I've definitely talked to people who have had those kinds of experiences in other scenarios, and it sucks. I never, ever, ever I never wish that on anyone. So whenever people see these images and they're inspired by it, I'm just like, please, like, your number one has to be safety.
Yeah.
And it has to be like, trust and respect. Like, that's just so, so, so important.
So we talked a little bit about boundary pushing and coloring outside the lines, if you will. What's next after this one? I mean, I know you said there's a couple shoots left in this series, but I know there's probably about 40 or 50 or 60 more ideas that you have in the head of yours of what's next. Can you give us a glimpse as to, what the next series might look like?
Well, I have another series that I've been working on for about 4 years, and hopefully, I mean, we've been doing test shoots up until this weekend. This weekend is supposed to be the first official shoot. But also we have a huge storm rolling in and I'm healing up from a neck injury. So we'll see what happens.
Another one?
Another one.
Jeez, what do you have against your neck? Come on.
I don't have anything against it. It was just a thing. So we'll see what happens this weekend. But I mean, yeah, this Shibari one was definitely going to keep going for a little while, at least 2 more shoots. It's always, about figuring out the silhouette that I'm looking for, and the people who are willing to do that kind of image, and obviously, bringing in men into it. People are like, they shout from the treetops.
Yeah, I was shocked to see
quality.
I was shocked to see that in there. Shocked to see guys in there, because as I was writing the direction of the questions I was going to ask you today last night, I was thinking, maybe I'll touch on the whole Me Too thing and how is that affecting Renee, and how she got out. And then I'm scrolling through the images and there's a guy in there. I'm like, okay, scratch that question.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, it goes back to equal representation. I mean, these images, it doesn't, let's see, there's no reason why there can't be people who identify as men and women in there, or people who identify neutrally. It's not really about like whether you're female or whether you're male. It's about, the personal experience that someone has with the rope and what a body can do when gravity is no longer in question.
Well, it's always in question, but you can creatively fight it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's definitely in question. Oh my God, we have a group chat with all of us, and there's always the next day. I'm like, show me your bruises.
Exactly. Your battle scars from the Renee Robbins shoot.
Yeah. I mean, they know what's up, but it's fun that way, So it'll be fun when we have the behind the scenes images and everything. I mean, that's the other thing that was really important with this series, is having behind the scenes photography taken, because there's so much that goes into these that the final artwork is only a part of the story. Like I said, like, it's the double tap scroll. It's just a few seconds of somebody's life. But there's so much that goes in ahead of time that I think is really, really fun to share alongside the work itself.
I love it. We got a couple of those pictures that'll be in the gallery for this blog post that we'll share. If people want to see this series, I mean, obviously you send me a bunch of the images, and they'll be in the gallery for this post. But if they want to see the full body of work, where should they go?
Well, right now the full body of work isn't anywhere online.
Ooh.
Yeah, sneak.
Do I have an exclusive version of it? I can't. This is kind of cool.
Some of the images there, they haven't been posted anywhere other than, let me think. There's some of it on my website. There's some of it on the Patreon. Of course, Patreon and my website are the two places to find stuff uncensored. But otherwise, the work is on Instagram. So, and there's no cohesive collection of it anywhere yet, and that's kind of intentional.
So on Instagram, it's what's your Instagram handle? Renee Robin Photography. Yeah,
Renee Robin Photography, or the website reneerobinphotography.com.
Okay. And the Patreon, yeah. What's the Patreon?
Yeah, so I'm experimenting with Patreon / Renee Robin. Okay. Yeah, I had too many people whose business acumen I respect give me shit about not being on there already. So I was like, okay, I'll give it a year.
Good. How's it going so far?
It's so funny. It's so freeing in some ways because I know that I can't get shut down there for sharing a nipple.
Yeah, right.
You know, so like unintentionally, like a lot of the work that is, more risque is definitely getting posted there because I don't have to worry about it, like, and I can get genuine feedback from people. And that's really interesting. I figured it would be a more stressful experience because, it's like another responsibility. And I'm just like, dude, like I got a commercial photography business to run. And, just like life in general is so busy, but actually it's been a breath of fresh air. I really, really have been enjoying it, and it's small right now, and I'm okay with that. And I definitely have told people like, hey, in creating this Patreon page, I definitely want it to be the work that you can find everywhere else. I hate hiding my work behind a paywall. I think it's gross. Yeah. I don't like that idea. It really bothers me. I want my work to be accessible to everyone. But unfortunately, Instagram, it's not going to happen.
Right. Yeah. Subject matter.
It's not going to happen. It's so risky right now. Like so many of my friends have had their accounts shut down, photographers, models, makeup artists, because some troll decided to just like hate them really hardly and then aggressively get their account shut down. There's nothing you can do. Some people get their accounts back, some people don't. So like that sucks. It is nice to share the work somewhere other than my website without being afraid of being shut down.
Yeah.
And that's really nice.
Yeah. And that's and that's where Patreon comes in because it's, crowd-funded, crowd-supported. You're not being forced to be on there, and it's I think it works.
Yeah, it's really, really, it's a very strange experience for me. I'd never considered it before. I was always just like, I don't believe in hiding my work behind a paywall. And so as a result, the work that's on there is the work that you can find on my website.
Yeah.
And, some of it's censored on Instagram. Some of it's too risky for Instagram. So it's like website and there only. But it is nice in a very strange way, a very unexpected way to just be like, yeah, this is actually, as an artist who's creating safe spaces for people, with Shibari and even with themselves, where they're like, they haven't been photographed before, or they're very shy. So I'm creating a safe space for them in the studio. It's funny to have a place online that feels like it's created a safe space for myself to share the work with people who are really keen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And who want to contribute back.
Love it. See? And there's that universe helping you out again, see? And showing you things that you hadn't considered before. Look at that.
Yeah, no, I fought that one super hard. I'm a troglodyte. I'm a technophobe.
Let's keep piling on. So cool. Oh, that's good.
That's a thing.
Renee Robin, you rock. Thank you for coming on again. I appreciate having you. Whenever I have you on, my brain explodes because you're a breath of fresh air and your work is you're always pushing boundaries, it seems like. You're always doing something a little bit different, a little more, trying to poke the bear a little bit and see what happens.
Well, this is admittedly the first time I've ever spoken publicly about this series ever. I've photographed, I'm blushing right now. Jesus Christ.
I'm making Renee Robin blush. Look at that.
The first and only time. But no, it's really nice to have, like, to talk about this body of work, because it's never been discussed about before, because it is fringy enough that most places are not okay with sharing it. I was really lucky that Sigma was willing to share one of the images that we did recently, because they'd sent over the new Sigma 70-200, which was awesome to photograph on. Oh my God, that lens is amazing. But they shared one of the mermaid images where she was all tied up and bent in half. And I was like, what is happening right now? Wow. And then you're willing to talk about this. Like, it's really nice to have, the line of acceptable shift a little bit, because I feel like 5 years ago, 2 years ago, there's no way this conversation or those kind of images would ever have been shared. So yeah. It's appreciated.
Yeah, you're welcome. I appreciate you doing it. Like I said, you're a breath of fresh air, obviously. But the work also is a breath of fresh air, especially considering, like we were talking about before, the sea of mediocrity that's out there, and a lot of people are just shooting stuff for the likes and for whatever reasons that they have, and not from some internal fire that's burning, and you seem to, everything you create seems to come from somewhere, and it's obvious that it comes from somewhere. Even that one shot, you remember that shot you did? I was going to say, do you remember that shot? But that shot of a woman diving off of a building with wings. Remember that? She had it was like an angel jumping off of a building.
Oh God, I peaked on that image, man. I've never beat that.
I love that shot. You and I talked about that shot in person, I think, once, and I got a little bit of the backstory behind that. But there's always a story behind the work that you're doing, and I appreciate that, and I think a lot of photographers can, especially people that are just coming up and trying to find their way and get their sea legs. Can learn a lot from that, and how fearless you seem to be with the topics you pick, and you don't care what people think, and it shows in the work that it's you and the authentic you coming through versus the like-driven Renee. So that's pretty awesome.
I super appreciate that. Yeah, I definitely always try to make sure that I'm fighting against myself and not everyone else. And even that gets sometimes where, I look online and I'm just like, oh my God, if I just shot pretty girls in natural light, yeah, in like big poofy dresses, like life would be so much easier. But at the same time, like I love that stuff and I love that imagery and I love creating it and I love consuming it because it's beautiful and it lights up the reptile brain. But it isn't always what I want to create all the time. Sometimes it's ogres and weird things and stuff like that. And, you have to take a deep breath and look inside and be like, okay, am I creating this for everyone else? Which is fine. But are you also creating it for yourself, and why? So
yeah. It's your therapy. It's therapy, right? Photography is therapy. Yeah. A lot of people say that though.
Photography is not my therapy.
It is not. Why not? Some people say it is. Why isn't it yours?
That switch had to happen when I started shooting commercially.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So lots of people will say like, I put my everything into this and my heart and my soul and everything. I do this because I really enjoy it. But once I started shooting commercially, I had to make that separation between church and state. Because it was just like, anybody who shoots commercially and they're getting revision after revision after revision, this isn't good enough. Or like an art director is like, like culling your vision, quote unquote, you can't get too attached to it. You have to be like, okay, this is a product. I'm a service provider. I'm a waiter or waitress of pixels to these clients. So if you're serving coffee, you can't care too much when someone says they don't like it. You just go, oh, okay, cool. Let's make you another one. Do you want more caramel or do you want more chocolate? Yeah. And so, yeah, that separation definitely had to happen for me once it became a business, which happened pretty early on, for reasons that we know. I had to be able to take that feedback without it like breaking me, because it was otherwise, it was like, oh, this is like the best piece of artwork I've ever made. And then the client gets it and they shred it and you're just like, shit. I couldn't let that keep affecting me anymore. So yeah, it's not my therapy at all, but I do create from an authentic place of myself.
I love it. Well, thanks for clarifying. I sit corrected. That's awesome. All right, Renee Robin Photography, patreon.com/Renee Robin, and Instagram.com/Renee Robin, or Renee Robin Photography on IG.
Renee Robin Photography. Yeah, there's a behind the scenes account called The Renee Robin. If you like seeing the BS life crap that goes on behind it, but obviously there's no final artwork being shared there, so
love it.
It's whatever you're into.
All right, Renee, you rock. As I said, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you, and we'll be in touch. You got to come on TWIP again and again. It's always a pleasure having you on.
I'm good with that. I'm super good with that.
All right, take care. Talk to you later.
Thanks for having me.
Peace. This is TWIP.